love to love her.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you do, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. So today's video is going to be a little bit controversial because I'm going to be talking about whips and spurs, my personal opinion on them, why I think you should or shouldn't use them, and some advice if you are going to use them. So starting with whips, for one thing I want to say, I'm talking about over and unders. If you don't know what an over under is, it's usually leather or rawhide, and it's long and usually thin, and you put it on your horn and you whip your horse on the butt with it while you're running. So that's what I'm referring to. I'm not talking about crops or any other types of whips in any other discipline, because that's a whole nother thing. And I do think they have their place in some situations. But personally for me, I have never, and I don't think I will ever use a whip while barrel racing. I have a few different reasons for this. Now, for one, I think that if your horse really loves barrel racing and running, they're going to run their hardest no matter if you're whipping them or not. And I honestly haven't really noticed in videos or in person watching that horses really do speed up much when you are whipping them. So why would you want to inflict more pain on them if it's not necessarily going to help you? And if you do have a horse that is very lazy and doesn't love to run out their hardest, maybe practice breezing them somewhere and just letting them run, and practice really using your body cues, leaning forward, putting your hands forward and kissing. Or sometimes, I know my horse, if I pet her on her neck while she's running, she usually runs faster. I don't know if it's just my energy transferring or what, but that seems to really help her. So those are some different things. And yeah, kissing, making little noises to get them to run harder without actually whipping them. And also, though, because you're not whipping, don't then start wailing on their sides. I think with your feet you should be more flagging, which is I don't know how to explain this. More movement in your ankles than in your whole legs. If you've watched my videos, you've probably seen me do this. I don't like to kick with my whole legs and fly in the air. It's just excessive. But I think on that note, we can probably move on to spurs, because now I'm talking about feet. So first I'll talk about types of spurs. So I know there is a big fad on bumper spurs, which are a spur that is more on the side of your heel rather than coming out the end of it. And I personally am not a huge fan of them. I have used them in the past. However, I think because these spurs, if you've seen a picture of them, I can put a picture in, but you can see that there's usually more than one rowel, and that's the part that spins, and they're on the side of your foot. So it's really hard to be very precise and careful with how you're touching your horse. And since it is something metal, it is a little bit more serious than just kicking them with your foot. And I think it's just a little excessive, and you can bump them when you're not meaning to a little easier than you can with the traditional type of spur, which is a shank and a rowel on the end. I prefer a shorter shank on my spurs because it's a little excessive if it's really long. And then also a smaller rowel, which has more rounded edges. I don't love the really sharp ones. So those are the type of spurs that I like to use. You don't have to get huge, big, crazy spurs. If you do, then you probably have more issues. But again, I want to say, I don't think that you should use any type of spurs if you don't have good control over your legs and feet, because it's really important that you're not touching them with this metal tool when you don't need to and when you don't mean to. So for a lot of people, I think, especially if you don't know how good of control you have, practice using them at home. Don't even take them to races, because especially when you're going those high speeds and doing high speed turns and things like that, sometimes you can kind of lose a little bit of control on your legs, and you don't want to be battering on your horse every time you move. So if you don't have good control yet, consider just practicing using them at home in slow work. Now, don't take advantage of them. this is really important. Just because your horse does something bad and you have these on your feet, don't start wailing on your horse. That's so unnecessary. You should never use that as a punishment. You should never use pain as a punishment. So I love Spurs personally because you can be very precise with not only where you're touching your horse on their belly, but how and how hard and when. And I feel like you can actually be softer with your cues, because if your horse is a little bit more dull to leg, then wailing on it with your heel is not necessarily better than just tapping them with a spur and getting your point across that way. Now, when you're kicking your horse with your whole foot, you can really actually wind your horse. It's not great to wail on them. And you're going to end up making your horse a lot more dull if you're constantly kicking them hard with your whole foot rather than just tapping them with a spur or rolling it up their stomach. So, yeah, it's better to be able to do a slight touch and have them listen to you than actually wail. And when I said I like how you can be very precise with where you're touching your horse, this can really come in handy if you're teaching your horse to do different turns. So a turn on the forehand, you'd want to put your foot slightly farther back to tell them that you want their hind end to move. And if you're doing a turn on the haunches, you would want to touch your horse a little bit farther forward. I feel like they're also very useful if you're doing lead changes, or even just for asking your horse to pick up the correct lead, because you can slightly move your one foot farther backwards to get them to pick up the opposite lead and things like that. So I also don't think that every horse necessarily needs spurs. I mean, if you already have a horse who is super high energy and, crazy to control, maybe you don't want to just put spurs on them. Get them used to your legs first and what your cues mean without an extra added tool. So those are a little bit of my opinions on whips and spurs. I know, going back to the whips, because what I was going to say about if your horse is a little bit more lazy and they don't want to run, you might want to do a little bit more investigating into why. Either maybe your horse doesn't really love barrel racing, which, I mean, you can choose to find ways to just move through that, or maybe your horse needs to find a different job. But also using a whip as an extra force, I mean, you're probably just going to make your horse really dull. And if they don't already love running fast and you're now whipping them, I mean, you might make your horse very angry and uncomfortable and even less happy doing what you're asking it. And then you might end up with alley issues. And then, I know there was one girl that I used to see at my local riding club who she had to have 2 big dressage whips just to get her horse in the arena. I can guarantee you that horse probably was in some type of pain, and that's why it didn't want to go in the arena. And by adding just extra force instead of trying to investigate why your horse is doing this, I mean, it's not very natural for a horse to just refuse to do something just because. And, ignoring your horse's signs that something's wrong or they don't like something and just whipping them in anyways, that's really sad to me. Like, I would never even think about doing that for my horse. There's so many types of pain problems that could be happening. And so just ignoring that and getting a whip or a bigger bit. And bits are another thing I can make a video of if you like, because I'm very particular about the bits that I use in my horse and I have strong opinions on them. Another thing that's kind of controversial that I was thinking about doing a video on is the use of rubber bands during barrel racing. So those are 2 other things. And also tie downs are another one I was thinking of. So those are a few other things that are a little bit controversial that I could definitely go more in depth about in another video if you like. But those are kind of my opinions on whips and spurs. Yeah, not for everybody. You should know why you're using them and how to use them before you just throw them on. So yeah, if you liked this video, leave a comment, like, and subscribe. If you have another video you would like to see, definitely let me know and I will try to get to that. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching.